Rebecca Martinez, a 27-year-old social worker from Phoenix, Arizona, has lived her entire life with the painful knowledge that her mother, Linda, refused to hold her when she was born. This rejection shaped Rebecca's childhood, filled with emotional distance and unanswered questions. Her father, David, always made excuses for Linda's cold behavior, claiming it was just her personality. But when Linda is diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at 58, Rebecca discovers a hidden box in her mother's closet that contains hospital records, letters, and photographs that reveal a devastating secret from the day she was born. A secret that explains everything and changes Rebecca's understanding of her mother's love forever. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and for 27 years, I believed my mother didn't love me because she couldn't even hold me when I was born. The Arizona sun was blazing through the hospital windows as I sat in the sterile waiting room of Phoenix General, watching my mother Linda sleep in her bed down the hall. At 58, she looked fragile, nothing like the strong, distant woman who had raised me. The early-onset Alzheimer's diagnosis had hit our family like a freight train 3 months ago, but in some twisted way, it had also brought me closer to answers I'd been seeking my entire life. "Rebecca, honey, why don't you go home and get some rest?" My father David's voice pulled me from my thoughts. His weathered hands shook slightly as he offered me a cup of hospital coffee. At 62, Dad had aged considerably since Mom's diagnosis. The man who once seemed invincible now looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. "I'm fine, Dad," I replied, though my voice betrayed my exhaustion. "I want to be here when she wakes up. The doctor said she might have a good day today." Dad sat beside me, his blue eyes filled with the same confusion and pain I'd been carrying for decades. "Rebecca, there's something we need to talk about. Something about your mother and why she's always been the way she is with you." My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" "When the nurses were going through her personal belongings yesterday, they found a box hidden in her closet, a box I've never seen before." He pulled out a small leather-bound container that looked ancient. "It has your birth certificate, hospital records, and other things. Things that might explain why she's always struggled to show you affection." I stared at the box, my hands trembling. "Dad, what are you talking about? What kind of things?" "Think," he said slowly, his voice breaking. "I think your mother has been keeping a secret from all of us. Something that happened the day you were born. Something that changed everything." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I processed his words. My entire life, I'd wondered why Linda Martinez could hug my younger brother Carlos with such warmth, could kiss his forehead and tell him she loved him, but could barely look me in the eyes. Every birthday, every school play, every graduation. She was there physically, but emotionally, she was a ghost. "Open it," I whispered, though every fiber of my being was terrified of what we might find. Dad's hands shook as he lifted the lid. Inside were yellowed documents, black and white photographs, and several letters written in my mother's careful handwriting. The first thing that caught my eye was a hospital bracelet, but it wasn't mine. The name read, Maria Elena Rodriguez. With my birth date, "Dad, who is Maria Elena Rodriguez?" His face went completely white. I don't know. "Rebecca, I swear to you I have no idea what this means." I picked up one of the letters, the paper so old it crackled between my fingers. It was addressed to someone named Dr. Patricia Williams, dated 3 days after my birth. My mother's handwriting was shaky, desperate. "Dear Dr. Williams, I can't stop thinking about what happened in that delivery room. Every time I look at Rebecca, I see her face. I see Maria Elena's face when they told her the news. How am I supposed to love this child when every time I hold her, I'm reminded of what we took from that poor woman? David doesn't understand. He says I should be grateful, that everything worked out for the best. But I know the truth. I know what really happened that night, and I can't live with myself." The letter fell from my hands like it was on fire. "Dad, what does this mean? What happened that night?" Before he could answer, a nurse approached us. "Excuse me, Mr. Martinez? Your wife is awake and asking for you. She seems to be having one of her clearer moments." We rushed to Mom's room, where she was sitting up in bed, her green eyes more focused than I'd seen them in weeks. When she saw me, something shifted in her expression, not the usual distance, but something that looked almost like fear. "Rebecca?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You found the box, didn't you?" I nodded, unable to speak. Tears began streaming down her face. "Oh, mija, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have told you years ago. I should have explained why I couldn't. Why it was so hard for me to. Mom, what happened the night I was born?" She looked at Dad, then back at me, her lucid moment hanging by a thread. "There was another woman in the hospital that night. Maria Elena Rodriguez. She was having complications with her delivery, and the doctors, they made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode." "What kind of mistake, Mom?" "The babies," she whispered, her eyes closing as if the memory was too painful to bear. "They switched the babies, Rebecca. For 3 days, I held her daughter while she held mine. And when they realized what happened, the room started spinning. I gripped the edge of her bed, trying to process what she was telling me. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying," Mom continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "that every time I looked at you, I wondered if we were raising the wrong child. If somewhere out there, our real daughter was growing up with another family. And if Maria Elena Rodriguez was wondering the same thing about you." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, the hum of the hospital, machines, Dad's sharp intake of breath. "But the DNA tests," I whispered. "Surely they would have—" "This was 1997, mija. DNA testing wasn't routine in hospital mix-ups back then. And by the time we could have done something about it, you were already 3 days old, and the paperwork had been filed. The hospital administration convinced both families that it was better to let things stay as they were rather than traumatize everyone involved." I stared at this woman who had given birth to me, who had raised me, who had struggled to love me. And suddenly everything made sense. The distance, the inability to show affection, the way she looked at me sometimes like she was searching for something. "So for 27 years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "you've been wondering if I'm really your daughter." She nodded, tears flowing freely now. "And I've been wondering if the daughter I was meant to love is out there, somewhere thinking her real mother abandoned her. What would you do if you discovered that your entire identity might be built on a hospital mistake? How would you even begin to process that kind of revelation?" But what Mom told me next would shatter everything I thought I knew about love, sacrifice, and what it truly means to be a family. The next morning, I sat in my apartment staring at the box my mother had hidden for nearly 3 decades, knowing that inside were answers that could destroy or heal everything. I'd barely slept after Mom's revelation at the hospital. The weight of her words pressed against my chest like a boulder. "They switched the babies, Rebecca." Every childhood memory now felt like a lie. Every moment of her emotional distance suddenly explained by 3 words that changed everything. My hands shook as I pulled out more documents from the leather box. There were medical records, not just from my birth, but follow-up appointments and correspondence between the hospital administration and both families. One letter, dated 6 months after my birth, made my blood run cold. It was from Maria Elena Rodriguez, written in broken English. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, I know this letter will come as shock, but I cannot live with silence anymore. Every night I look at Isabella, the name I gave to baby I brought home, and I see your eyes, not mine. She has your husband's chin, your mother's nose. I love her with all my heart, but I know in my soul she is not mine. My real daughter, the one you are raising. She has my mother's birthmark on her left shoulder blade, shaped like a small crescent moon. Please, I am begging you, let us meet and discuss this. I am not trying to take children away, but we both deserve to know the truth. My coffee mug crashed to the floor as I reached behind me, feeling for the birthmark I'd carried my entire life. The small crescent moon on my left shoulder blade that Mom had always said was just a coincidence, that lots of people had birthmarks. Maria Elena Rodriguez had been right. I was her biological daughter. I grabbed my phone and called the only person who could help me process this. Jess, I need you to come over, now, and bring coffee because I just destroyed my only mug. Jessica Chen had been my best friend since college, and as a private investigator, she had access to resources I desperately needed. Within an hour, she was sitting on my couch, reviewing the documents with the focused intensity that made her excellent at her job. Rebecca, this is insane, she said, holding up the hospital records. Look at this incident report. 3 babies were born within hours of each other that night. You, Isabella Rodriguez, and another baby who died during delivery. The chaos in the maternity ward was so intense that the name tags got mixed up on the bassinets. Jess, I need you to help me find her. Find Isabella. Find the woman who might be my biological sister. Jessica's expression grew serious. Are you sure about this, Becca? This could open up a world of complications, legal issues, emotional trauma for multiple families. Are you prepared for what you might find? Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Dad. Rebecca, you need to get to the hospital immediately. Your mother. She's having another lucid episode and she's asking for you. She says she has something else to show you. The drive to Phoenix General felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. When I arrived, I found Mom sitting up in bed, more alert than I'd seen her since the diagnosis. In her hands was another envelope, this one sealed and addressed to me in her careful handwriting. Mia, I wrote this letter 5 years ago when I first started forgetting things. I was terrified that the Alzheimer's would take my memories before I could tell you the whole truth. Her voice was steady, determined. There's more to the story than I told you yesterday. I sat down beside her bed, my heart racing. More? After we received Maria Elena's letter asking to meet, your father and I made a decision. We drove to her address in South Phoenix with you in the car seat. We were going to do the right thing, arrange for DNA testing, figure out how to handle the situation properly. She paused, her eyes distant as she accessed memories that were quickly fading. But when we got there, the house was empty. The neighbors told us that Maria Elena Rodriguez had died in a car accident just 2 weeks after she'd sent us that letter. She was coming home from her job at the restaurant when a drunk driver ran a red light. The world stopped spinning. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She's dead? Yes, mija, but Isabella, the baby she'd been raising, she survived. She was in the car but wasn't seriously injured. She went to live with Maria Elena's sister, Carmen Rodriguez, who moved to Tucson shortly after to start fresh. Mom handed me the sealed envelope. This contains everything I could find about Carmen Rodriguez and Isabella over the years. I hired a private investigator without telling your father. I needed to know that the little girl was okay, that she was loved and cared for. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photographs spanning decades. A dark-haired toddler who looked exactly like my baby pictures, an elementary school girl with David's distinctive chin, a teenager with my mother's green eyes, and finally, a recent photograph of a young woman who could have been my identical twin. Her name is Isabella Santos now, Mom continued. She took her adoptive mother's married name. She's 27, just like you. She lives in Tucson and works as a pediatric nurse at University Medical Center. And Rebecca, Mom's voice broke. She has no idea about any of this. Carmen never told her about the hospital mix-up. I stared at the photograph of Isabella Santos, this stranger who was biologically my parents' daughter, who had my father's smile and my mother's eyes. She looked happy, surrounded by what appeared to be a loving family at someone's birthday party. "Mom, why didn't you ever try to contact her?" "Because I was selfish," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Because by the time I found her, you were 5 years old, and she was settled with a family who adored her. Because I realized that loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even if it breaks your heart." She reached out and took my hand for the first time in years, her touch gentle and warm. "But mostly, Mija, because I realized that DNA doesn't make a family. Love makes a family. And even though I struggled to show it, even though I was haunted by questions and guilt, you were always my daughter in every way that mattered. I just couldn't forgive myself for the pain I knew this secret was causing both families." The irony hit me like a freight train. My mother hadn't been unable to love me because I wasn't her biological daughter. She'd been unable to love me because she was so consumed with guilt about potentially raising the wrong child that she'd forgotten how to show affection to the child she was actually raising. "So what happens now?" I asked, holding up the photograph of Isabella. Mom squeezed my hand tighter. "That's up to you, Mija. But whatever you decide, please know that you are my daughter, my pride and joy. And I'm sorry it took losing my mind to finally tell you how much I love you." Have you ever faced a choice between preserving someone else's happiness and satisfying your own need for truth? How do you weigh the potential consequences of a decision that could change multiple lives forever? But what I discovered when I finally decided to contact Isabella would prove that sometimes the universe has a way of bringing people together, even when secrets have kept them apart for decades. 3 weeks later, I sat in a small cafe in downtown Tucson, my palms sweating as I watched every woman who walked through the door, wondering if she was the biological daughter my parents had raised in secret in their hearts for 27 years. After endless deliberation and countless conversations with Jessica, Dad, and my therapist, I'd made the decision to reach out to Isabella Santos, not to disrupt her life or make any demands, but simply to offer her the truth she'd never been given the chance to know. I'd sent her a carefully worded message through Facebook, explaining that I had information about her birth family that she might want to know. To my surprise, she'd responded within hours, agreeing to meet. Her message was cautious but curious. "I've always felt like there were missing pieces to my story. Maybe you can help me understand." At exactly 2 p.m., a woman walked into the cafe who took my breath away. Isabella Santos was indeed my mirror image. But more than that, she carried herself with a confidence and warmth that reminded me of the mother I'd always wanted Linda to be. She had David's height, Mom's graceful movements, and something indefinably familiar about the way she surveyed the room before spotting me. "Rebecca?" she asked, approaching my table with a cautious smile. I stood up, nodding, unable to speak for a moment. Seeing her in person was surreal, like looking at an alternate version of myself who had grown up loved and secure. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," I managed to say as we both sat down. "I know this must seem incredibly strange." "Strange doesn't begin to cover it," Isabella laughed, and even her laugh was familiar. "But I have to admit, I've been curious about my birth family my entire life. My adoptive mother, Carmen, has always been wonderful, but she could never give me many details about my biological parents. She said they died in an accident when I was a baby." My heart clenched. Carmen had created a lie to protect Isabella from a complicated truth, just like my parents had hidden the truth from me. "Isabella, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, but I have documentation to prove everything." I pulled out a folder containing copies of all the hospital records, photographs, and letters. On March 15th, 1997, 2 babies were accidentally switched at Phoenix General Hospital. You were supposed to go home with David and Linda Martinez, and I was supposed to go home with Maria Elena Rodriguez. Isabella's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. I'm sorry, what? Your biological parents are David and Linda Martinez. My biological mother was Maria Elena Rodriguez, who died in a car accident when we were both 6 months old. We've been living each other's lives for 27 years. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Isabella set down her coffee cup with shaking hands and stared at me like I'd just told her the earth was flat. That's not possible. Hospital don't just switch babies. That's something that happens in movies. I thought the same thing, I said gently, sliding the folder across the table. But it happened to us. And the most incredible part is that Maria Elena Rodriguez suspected the switch. She wrote letters to my parents asking to meet, to discuss her suspicions. She believed you were their biological daughter and that I was hers. Isabella opened the folder with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the hospital records and incident reports. When she saw the photograph of her as a baby next to mine, her face went completely white. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is why I've never looked like anyone in my adoptive family. This is why Carmen always seemed sad when I asked about my birth parents. She knew, didn't she?" I think Carmen might have suspected, but she was probably trying to protect you from a painful truth. Isabella was quiet for a long time, studying the documents with the focused attention of someone whose entire world was shifting. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "So David and Linda Martinez, they're my biological parents?" "Yes. And they've been carrying this secret, this guilt, for 27 years. My mother especially struggled with it. She could barely show me affection because every time she looked at me, she wondered if she was raising the wrong child while her real daughter was somewhere else. And your biological mother, Maria Elena, she's really dead?" I nodded. "She died, trying to come home from work to take care of you. Carmen has been your mother in every way that matters since you were 6 months old." Isabella wiped away tears that had started flowing down her cheeks. "This explains so much. I work in pediatrics, and I've always had this intuitive connection with children that seemed to come from nowhere. My adoptive family doesn't have anyone in healthcare. But if my biological mother worked as hard as you're describing to support me, maybe that drive to care for others is something I inherited." We sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the magnitude of what this meant. For our lives, our identities, our families. "Isabella, I want you to know that I'm not here to disrupt your life or make any claims on your family relationships. Carmen raised you and loved you. She's your real mother, regardless of biology." "But David and Linda Martinez," Isabella said, slowly, "they're my biological parents who have been wondering about me for 27 years?" "Yes, and they're good people who made the best decisions they could with impossible circumstances. My father especially would love to meet you, if you're interested. But there's no pressure. I just felt you deserved to know the truth." Isabella was quiet for a long time, then asked, "What's Linda like? My biological mother?" My heart broke a little as I considered how to answer that question honestly. She's brilliant and stubborn and has been fighting early-onset Alzheimer's for the past few months. She's probably the strongest woman I know, but she's also been carrying tremendous guilt about this situation for decades. She's been unable to fully love me because she was so consumed with wondering about you. And you grew up feeling unloved because of a situation none of us could control. Exactly. But Isabella, meeting you, seeing how well you turned out, how happy and successful you are, I think that might finally give her the peace she's been searching for." Isabella reached across the table and took my hand. "I'd like to meet them. I'd like to meet David and Linda Martinez. And I'd like you to meet Carmen, my adoptive mother. She deserves to know the truth, too." 2 hours later, we were still talking, sharing stories about our childhoods, our careers, our dreams. The similarities were uncanny. We'd both been drawn to helping others. We both had the same unusual birthmark. We both had struggled with feeling like outsiders in our families for reasons we couldn't understand. As we prepared to leave, Isabella said something that will stay with me forever. You know what's funny? I've spent my whole life wondering why I felt like something was missing, like there was a piece of my story I didn't know. But sitting here with you, I realized that the missing piece wasn't just my biological parents, it was my sister. It was you. Have you ever discovered that the family you were meant to have was out there waiting for you all along? How do you rebuild relationships when everyone involved has been living with partial truths? The reunion dinner we planned for the following week would bring together David, Linda, Carmen, Isabella, and me for the first time. 5 people whose lives had been shaped by one night in a hospital 27 years ago, finally ready to create the family we were always meant to be. But the biggest surprise came when Linda met Isabella for the first time and whispered the words that healed decades of pain. I've been waiting my whole life to hold you, mija. Welcome home. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about romance. Sometimes they're about families finding their way back to each other, choosing love over biology, and discovering that the bonds we create are stronger than the ones we're born with. Today, Isabella and I are sisters in every sense that matters. We've helped our parents heal from decades of guilt and grief. Carmen has become a second mother to me, and David and Linda have embraced their expanded family with joy. Mom's Alzheimer's has progressed, but she has moments of clarity where she looks at both Isabella and me and smiles, finally at peace with the choices she made and the love she was always capable of giving. The hospital made a mistake, 27 years ago, but sometimes the most beautiful families are born from the most unexpected circumstances. Love isn't about DNA, it's about choice, commitment, and the courage to keep showing up for each other, no matter how complicated the story becomes. What would you choose? The family you were born into, or the family that chooses to love you? In our case, we discovered we didn't have to choose at all.